Hello, this is A Voice in the Darkness, and I'm your host, Gwendolyn Forte. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Whether you are at home or maybe you're in your car or at the gym or walking outside or possibly you're in a hospital room. Wherever you are today, I'm so excited that you tuned in and I'm glad that you're here. The purpose of A Voice in the Darkness is to encourage, to uplift, and to enlighten. So many people today are walking through challenging, difficult times. And so many times we want to give up right in the middle. But I want to encourage you today not to give up, not to give in, and not to throw in the towel. You got this. You might say, Gwendolyn, why are you so confident? Why are you so sure? Because I've walked through many challenging times in my life, and I'm telling you, I wanted to just say, God, I'm done. Matter of fact, I did say, God, I'm done. And you know what? He sent people to minister life to me, to minister a word to me. And it literally changed the direction of my life, my heart posture, and I was able to complete that task. And I want to encourage you today, no matter what you're facing, no matter what you're going through, I know it can get difficult, but I'm telling you, it will get better. The situation will turn. You got this. You are an overcomer. You got this and you can make it. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in on today, especially if you are new to A Voice in the Darkness podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in on today. And if you're a regular, thank you for coming back and downloading this episode. Check it out on every major platform if you can, on Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, Castbox. Thank you so much for subscribing and writing a comment. And those of you just been faithful to A Voice in the Darkness, thank you so much. I just want to dive into this week's episode because I'm actually podcasting live on this Friday night from Mexico. Yes, I'm in Mexico. And I always just want to be faithful to release a current word to each and every one of you today. My husband and I are celebrating. He graduated and we get the opportunity just to celebrate just a bit. And we're excited about that. So I want to come to you today with a word, confronting fear. Confronting fear. Okay, so many of you maybe in your life have dealt with fear. I don't know if where you've been, but I know for myself, fear has been a reality, something that in my life and in my journey, I've experienced fear, okay? I've experienced fear. And I don't know if you're listening to me, maybe that's something you're experiencing right now. It is an emotion that literally feels so real. And I know that in this journey that we call life, we experience all types of things where this emotion of fear, where this overwhelming presence have been around us and we've experienced it, we've walked in it, and it literally can paralyze a person. And I know if this is something that you're walking through right now, you could actually say, Gwendolyn, I hear you and I understand what you are talking about. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how to confront this fear. Okay, we're going to talk about today. The title of this week's episode is Confronting Fear. And I want to say, I want to define it from an acronym that I heard that I felt was really good. And I want to define it from this acronym. And I heard this before, and I really feel like it's a great depiction of fear. And this acronym is false evidence appearing real, okay? That F is false, that E is evidence, that A is appearing, and that R is real. False evidence appearing real. And this is, I just thought about that and I was like, wow, it's so true. This is this is really how fear presents itself. And today we have to make a decision that we're going to confront it, okay? And I want to talk to you from a book in the Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 17. And many of you will listen to the replay or you're downloading this. And I want you to go back and really read that chapter because this is really going to be great. If anybody heard about King David, I want to talk about David before he was a king. This is when David was very, very young, like a teenager instead of a king. He was a young boy. And I want to talk to you about how he dealt with rough, crazy situations in his life where I'm telling you, fear and opposition was all around him, but he was able to confront this thing, okay? And we see that he experienced great victory. And I honestly believe we could experience great victory as well. And so if you would go with me to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and I want to read to you verse 26. And this is the New King James Version. And it says, then David, now let me paraphrase. Here we go. We have the Israel's army under the direction of King Saul. Okay, they were cowering down to Goliath, and they were cowering down, okay, to their opponent because of this huge giant that they had on their side. And this giant name was Goliath. And now David, who was really a shepherd boy, and then he was advanced to be a water boy, bringing water and food for his brothers and those who were in military. And he heard about how Goliath was challenging, okay, God's people, and how he was mocking them, okay? And so listen, I'm just going to pick up and paraphrase, and where we start here from verse 26. It said, then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? Then he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So now young David is asking a question like, what's going to be the reward? That's the first. And then second, who is this crazy person that would dare defy our God? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Okay, so here we are now, and I'm just laying this picture for you, and I want to go deeper into this, and I want to start at verse 41. So now we're going to just slide on down to verse 41 and just really get into this. So now we read, so it says, okay, I'm going to start at 40. It said, then he took his staff in his hand and he chose for himself, this is David, 5 smooth stones from the brook, and he put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Now I'm going to start at verse 41, and I'm going to read this really clear. It says, so the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. Okay, he said he disdained him. Another translation says he mocked him, or he scorned him. Okay, he scorned him. He had disdain for him. Okay, because he was young. And so now it goes on to say verse 42. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, like he said, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. Verse 43. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Verse 44. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. This is getting deep. Verse 45. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Verse 47. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord, and he will give you into our hands. Okay. Verse 48. So it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to David to meet David. Then David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank in his forehead and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine and slang and with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. And that Philistine was Goliath. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of his sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with it. Okay, this is fabulous. Okay, verse 52. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entry of the valley to the gates of Ekron. And I'm going to stop right there. And I want you to understand that the enemy loves to come at you, come at us, to intimidate. And what I said earlier was false evidence appearing real. He tells lies. He tries to paralyze you. He wants you to be stagnant. He don't want you to fulfill purpose. He doesn't want you to come and do great things in your bloodline. He wants you to stop. He wants you to give up. He wants you to be just totally shaken in your boots and feel all kinds of ways. But I'm telling you today that we are called to confront fear, okay? And let me tell you some things right now. Number one, the enemy hates that God, listen, the enemy hates this, that God has beautified his covenant sons and daughters. The enemy hates that. So this is why he wants us to fear, because if we fear, he could if we give him this place, if we give him authority and relinquish and abdicate our places, it gives him a right to come in, because he hates us, okay? And number one, the enemy hates that God has beautified his covenant sons and daughters. Why would I say this? Because verse 42 is very, very clear. Verse 42, he says, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he says he disdained David, or another translation said he showed such angry posture towards David, because he was only a youth. He was ruddy, but he was good looking. Okay? The enemy hates that God has beautified his covenant sons and daughters. You are a covenant son and daughter. And listen to me, just because you are serving God, I'm telling you, you have been beautified by the Father. You carry a grace, you carry a beauty, and you carry God's covering upon your life. And the enemy hates it. He hated him, and he scorned and he disdained David because he was good looking. That good looking here in the scripture, let me tell you, it's natural. But I want to go a little bit further today and say, you're good looking in the spirit because God has beautified you. Okay. Number two, The enemy then will try to release curses towards us. Do you hear me? He will try to release curses towards you. But listen, but the shield of faith will protect you. The shield of faith will protect you. You can see this in verse 43. Right here in this story it says, so the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. So of course he's taking and pulling from this small gods gods, and he's trying to curse David. But listen, not one of those curses, not one weapon formed against you shall prosper. That's Isaiah 54:17. You have to understand that Ephesians 6 talk about the shield of faith to quench every fiery dart of the devil. Psalms 3:3 says, thou, O Lord, are a shield for me. You are the glory and the one who lift my head. Hear me on today. No matter what type of curse that the enemy will spew at you, your children, your marriage, your family, it will not prosper. It will not carry any weight. It will fall to the ground. This is the word of God. God is a shield for us. And when you're walking in faith, the shield of faith will quench this fiery dart. Be encouraged on today. Okay? Be encouraged on today. And listen to this. The enemy tries to intimidate us. And we see this in verse 44. Okay? We see this in verse 44. It says, and the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. So in other words, she's really trying to taunt and intimidate David. And that's how the enemy is telling you. He's telling you, go ahead, try it. As soon as you try, I bet you'll fail. It won't work out. Try it. This is going to happen to you. This is what I'm going to do to your family. This is what I'm going to do to your finances. You better not take a step. Oh, watch, I overthrow you. It's going to fail. Listen, that's intimidation. It's a spirit of intimidation, and it will not work, and it will not prosper. I want to give us some keys today to confront fear. Keys to confront this giant of fear that has been plaguing your life, that has been coming against your forward movement. Number one, understand our covenant with God. We got to understand that we have a covenant with God. And we see this in verse 26. David spoke to the men who stood by him, says, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Okay, one, uncircumcised. He wasn't someone who had covenant. So he's saying, who is this person who's not walking in covenant like we are? We're in covenant with God. Okay? This man is not in covenant. Who is he? So we have to understand that we have a covenant with God. And when you understand and get a revelation of covenant, God stands and protects, because what is his, listen, is ours. What's ours is his. This is a blood covenant because of Jesus, and we have to stand on this revelation. Number two, listen, understand that God is all powerful and almighty. The God that we serve is not a weak God. He is power. He's all powerful. And we can see this in verse 45. And listen, David was very, very clear to make this point. And in verse 45, let me read this to you. He says, then David said to the Philistines, you come to me with the sword and with the spear and with the javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defied, okay? It says, whom you defied. So he's saying today, you got to understand that our God is all powerful, okay? I come to you in the name of the Lord, listen, who you defied. I come to you in God's name. Okay, he is all powerful, and David understood this. And number three, have faith in God. Have faith in God. We see this in verse 46 and 47. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take from your head. Listen to this. And this is key. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of this Philistine to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. declare that the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. David had faith in God. David knew that God was going to deliver this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine, Goliath, into his hand. His faith was in God. It was not in his own ability, but he knew what God would do. And I believe that we have to put our faith in God no matter what we are facing, no matter what you are facing, your faith is in God. The last point, number 4, is walk in boldness. This is something that we're all called to walk in. And I believe that you are strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, and that a spirit of boldness is on the inside of you. And I call that boldness out. We see that David walked in boldness in verse 48. It says, So it was when the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David. Listen, then David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. That's bold, okay? Then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead so that the stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. We see this plain and clear that David ran towards Goliath. He took out his sling. He took out of his stone out of his bag, and he slung this stone, and it hit him in the head. And he did it with such boldness. And who runs to the battle? God wants us to run towards this thing called fear. You got to attack it. You got to confront it. You can't hide. You can't say, oh my goodness, it's too much. No, it's not too much. Number one, if you understand that, listen, we have a covenant with God, okay? We have a covenant with God. Number two, you have to understand that God is all powerful. God is all powerful. We have to understand this. We do not come in our own name. His name is power. Okay, his name is Almighty. Do we understand that? Number 3, we got to have faith in God. You can't have faith in your ability. You can't have faith in what someone else did, but our faith is in God. And number 4, we have to choose to walk in boldness like David. David ran and confronted this thing. He ran towards Goliath. What is your Goliath? What is this thing that seems so insurmountable, that tries to intimidate you, control you, defy you, make you paralyzed and to be stagnant? The devil is a liar today. You are called, listen, to confront this spirit of fear. Listen what the word tells us in 2 Timothy 1:7, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he's given us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. I'm going to say that again. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but that of power, love, and a sound mind. You are called to confront fear. Number 1, understand your covenant with God. Number 2, understand God is all powerful. His name is Almighty. Number 3, have faith in God, not in your own ability. And number 4, walk in boldness. And I believe when we do these things, we will directly confront any giant of fear, intimidation that would try to silence you or give you a gag order or cause you to be paralyzed. I'm telling you, you got this, okay? You got this. Thank you so much for tuning in on today. And I would love for you to just, listen or download. I'm on every major platform. You can check me out on Amazon Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, Castbox. And I would love for you to just maybe write a review, subscribe, and follow. That would be such a blessing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So until next time, I'm Gwendolyn Forte with a voice in the darkness, signing off. God bless you.